Namaste. We had read a prayer of March 21st yesterday, but today let us go back 3-4 days in time. This is a prayer which we have read earlier in one of the talks, but it's a prayer which is so very relevant for today's times and what we means humanity is going through. And we see in it the direct remedy that the Divine Mother is proposing. So there is a human remedy, of course. Human remedy moves with the mind and the analytical mind, and it looks into matter, it looks into various things. And as we know, it has its own place. This is a world based on physical matter, and therefore physical knowledge has its own meaning. It may not apply to the gods, they don't need this knowledge, but for human beings, physical knowledge, knowledge of matter, knowledge of body processes, it all has its own relevance. But there is a higher science. As long as we understand that this knowledge is not everything, there is a deeper truth, there is a higher science, there is another way to live, a different way to be, then it opens the door to a new approach towards life, its challenges, its difficulties, its problems, its issues, and even illnesses. So, this prayer directly reveals to us what we should do, or rather, what should be our state and what should be our inner action when we are confronted with a physical difficulty, say an illness. This is a prayer dated March 17th, 1914. Mother is still on board the ship that is taking her to Sri Aurobindo. As soon as physical conditions are a little difficult, and there results from them some unease. See, these words are very interesting. Dis-ease, unease. So where does ease come from? It comes actually from the psychic being. She reveals that much later, that this is the source of real ease. But when there is a disturbance in it, then there is a dis-ease, disharmony or imbalance or unease, sometimes simply because we are in a difficult physical condition. The way we are traveling, some situation, we are in surroundings which are not very pleasant. So it can lead to unease in the body. If we know how to surrender completely before thy will, holding cheap life or death, health or illness, our integral being enters immediately into harmony with thy law of love and life. So, up till now, in the course of evolution, our body acts under the laws of the body, physical world. Then, as it evolves, now with evolved human beings, with a developed mind, developed intelligence, the body can to an extent be brought under the influence of the mind. It's in fact one of the crucial steps necessary in this yoga for the supramental transformation, that even those activities which we call as automatic should be brought under the influence of the mind. Then later on they have to be supramentalized, but initially as a phase. So, this is how the mind operates, and the laws of the mind. Now, laws of the mind are also laws of ignorance. So, if you do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, that will happen. They are nothing but a whole field of ignorance, because the mind doesn't really know. It studies a few things, gathers some data, declares something, then later on it refutes what it has known. A simple, in today's context, the example, people are talking about a particular drug, whether it's helpful, whether it's harmful. Until date, there is no consensus, though physicians use it, and some are helped, some are not. So this is how the mental sciences operate. But its knowledge is always shadowed with doubt. But when we make the real surrender with the true attitude, and this surrender, she says, true surrender means not a surrender with this idea, I am surrendering to you, please see to it that I get well soon. No, that's not surrender, that's a demand. We can pray like that, there is nothing wrong in praying, but surrender is where I completely abandon myself in your hands. Whether you choose for me life or death, health or illness, it's up to you. And in that case, whether we recover or we pass away, either way it's the best possible condition. Not that one would pass away. The divine always protects, unless for some reason the psychic being may decide. That's a different part altogether. So, this state of surrender, when we do, then the divine law begins to operate upon us. People may ask, why doesn't it directly operate? Well, because if it operates very directly, we have not tuned ourselves. Its pressure will crush us. It's like asking that there is supposing somebody told that a very intense sunlight is going to cure us of all illnesses. All right, try that sunlight. Well, we are not ready. If that sunlight is increased to a certain intensity, our body will get scorched. So, what to speak of the divine power? That's why, when children they develop, sometimes in children there is jaundice. So, they have to be exposed to ultraviolet light of the sun, literally. So that in olden times, even babies were asked that you put into the sunlight for some time. Now, this sunlight is curative. Actually, sunlight is curative for many things. But can we bear it? That's the important part. So, this is ordinary sunlight, physical sunlight. Now, if the divine power were to act and the body is not receptive, it resists, then it's likely to break down. That's why the divine himself has to moderate his power to a large extent before he acts. But if we have prepared our body very consciously, supposing we do regular exercise, physical culture is meant to open the body to the divine. And by physical culture, it doesn't mean that we have to do some very high-tech gymnastics in a proper guided method. No, all that is required. Let's say we walk half an hour a day, but during that walk we try to open our body to the divine mother. When we are doing work, so many physical works we are doing all the time, we have this aspiration that may this body open to your influence, to your force, to your working, to your grace, your light. So slowly the body becomes receptive and open to the divine influence. Now, this, by the very act of surrender, suddenly we put it under that divine law. And what is the divine law? It is the law of love and life. It gives life and it gives love. The two healing agents, life itself. You see, in any illness, we see that an illness depletes the life energy, and it's people begin to feel very weak inside, as if there is no energy, because something is depleting the life energy. Similarly, love is a great healer. There are scientists, even oncosurgeons, who speak about it, that love which can create miracles, and lot of illness can be connected to love. And why? Because love brings joy into the system, and it's joy which makes this whole machinery run in a beautiful way. It brings the will to live. Whereas the opposite, depression, lack of joy, it begins to starve the cells of the needed nourishments and the white blood cells. The immune system, it begins to get depressed. And where does this joy come from? One, from life. There is a joy which is there in life, and it comes from love. So the divine law is a law of love and life. Our integral being enters immediately into harmony with thy law of love and life, and all physical indisposition ceases to give place to a well-being, calm, deep, and peaceful. Now, I have seen there is a tendency in people to then go and get the reports done and see whether they are improving or not. Now, there is a difference. There may be a problem with the reports, but as far as we are concerned, the indicator is calm, sense of peace, sense of well-being, the sense of energy which is returning. Reports are one aspect, and we all know that reports are not absolute. Doctors are not supposed to treat report, they are supposed to treat a patient in the totality. But the sense of health begins to declare itself by the sense of well-being inside. Health begins to declare itself by the sense of calm, and a calm which is deep and peaceful, when we know that yes, the recovery process has started. It will take some time for the parameters to come back to normal, but that's a different aspect. Once centrally things are corrected, then everything else will follow. This is the first sutra, to surrender completely to the divine will without caring for whatever the result may be. Then she gives a second sutra. I have noticed that if we enter into an activity which requires a great physical endurance, what fatigues the most is the anticipation in advance of all the difficulties to which we shall be exposed. So this anticipation that what may happen, maybe this may happen, see, a lot of energy we have wasted in fear, in anxieties, whereas well, we have to conserve this energy. If the energy is already depleted, then actually when the enemy comes, we have no strength to fight. There is a very nice little episode, a story in Ramayana which the mother recounts very beautifully, and it's a very profound story. The story is that when Ravana and Rama confront each other on the battlefield, so Ravana is constantly bragging about his capacities, his prowess, and all this. Then Rama, after hearing a soliloquy for quite some time, he says, Ravana, would you like to waste your energy in this, or would you actually like to fight? Now, this ability to conserve energy, Sri Aurobindo speaks about it as the power, the strength of stillness. So she says, how do we waste energy? Not just in activity, not in physical activity, but anticipating, we are going to climb the hill. So we start thinking, it is going to be very difficult, we are going to get tired, how much is the height, etc., etc. So we should not do that because it's a waste of energy. And when we anticipate it, we actually are programming ourselves in that direction. So what we should do, she says, it is much wiser at every moment to look only at the difficulty of the present minute. So when we are, let's say, not well, so look at the immediate thing, not what may happen after 2 days, 4 days, 5 days. When we are climbing, look at the immediate issue at hand. If I'm getting tired, just take a little rest and then start. So this is the way we should approach difficulty of the present minute. This makes the effort easier because it is always proportionate to the sum of force, the resistance we command. So we are given always that much amount of energy which is in proportion to the difficulty. Mother goes on to say, atom by atom, weight by weight. But then why we are not able to overcome? Because we make the difficulty much bigger than it is by anticipating. So we are actually making it plump and fat by all our anticipations and fear, and make it seemingly into a much bigger giant than it actually is. So she is reminding us, always we are given the strength to resist a problem, a difficulty, provided we focus on the problem of the moment. And then she reminds us, the body is a marvelous instrument. After all, if you really look at it, our body has evolved through not millenniums, lakhs of years. Nature has evolved it. And it has gone through, because we inherit that knowledge in some way within ourselves. Our body has evolved in jungles, forests, face all the challenges, virus, bacteria, dangerous animals, poisonous bites, elemental energies, tornadoes, hurricanes. All this it has faced. And every time nature has done something within it to help us. Sri Aurobindo speaks of the body as a mysteries workshop, an occult mysteries workshop. That is our body. The Upanishad speaks of the gods residing within the body. In each part of our body, there is a godhead which resides. That's how we have these so many gods, because each of the function is performed by one god-like energy, god or an aspect of the divine power or energy. Sri Aurobindo even goes on to say, almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. So body is a marvelous instrument, and the mother would say it's a docile instrument. But why it doesn't function? Because we have given it to the wrong master. And the wrong master is the mind and the vital. Vital is a very bad master. It makes the body do whatever it feels like doing. Whereas the mind, with all its dogmas, this way, that way. So mind has a false illusion of knowledge, and vital has a false illusion of power, and they both put our body on a kind of not just overdrive, but driving in all kinds of directions. They confuse the body, and therefore it loses it. So she says, the body is a marvelous instrument. It is our mind that does not know how to use it. And instead of promoting its suppleness, its plasticity, puts into it a certain fixity arising from preconceived ideas and unfavorable suggestions. Preconceived ideas about food, about sleep, and many things, which while it's good to form a habit, that also she says, but it should be supple enough so that we don't get bound even to our own ideas about it. And the second thing, by unfavorable suggestions. Unfavorable suggestion is if one has a little, scratch, it is going to turn into tetanus. If we have a little cough, we start anticipating the most deadly diseases. If we have a little chest pain, oh, I am having a heart attack. This is not to say that we should be careless about things. Yes, we should do what we have to do, but the body has wonderful reserves. I know the story of a man. It's a real story. He was driving, and it's army person. He had a chest pain, and he knew that it's a heart attack. So he called up his wife and simply said, "I am going to the hospital." He didn't say what he's doing and why he's going. And with that pain, he drove about 16 kilometers all the way in Delhi to the army hospital, walked to the acute ward, and the emergency, and said that I am having a heart attack. Would you take an ECG? And yes, it was a florid heart attack, but he drove all the way, keeping his calm, maybe taking some deep breaths, because sometimes in life we may be caught up in a situation like that. So the body will listen if we know how to stay quiet and how to use its energy in the right way. But if the unfavorable suggestions start coming, if all the way he was afraid, oh, I am going to die, what if I collapse on the way, what if the steering swerves, what if I have an accident, then surely things may not have turned out to be so lucky. So the unfavorable suggestions we have to keep away. Then the third thing she is revealing to us, the third sutra or the fourth one, the supreme science. But this supreme science, he's using the word science, so there is a process in it. We may not understand the process, but as Mother would say, even miracles have a process. There is nothing like an absolute miracle. It's not like magic that out of nothing something comes out. Magic is an illusion. So there is nothing there, it gives us a feeling that there is something. But miracle is a process. Only we don't know the process, we don't see the process, so we call it a miracle. It's like when a person switches on the light and the light bulb comes up. For a child, it's a miracle. Or a doctor gives a medicine and we suddenly feel instantaneous relief. Patients do come and tell sometimes that aapne chamatkar kar diya, but there is no miracle in it. Actually, there is a process. The doctor understands, the patient does not. And because he has faith, the miracle takes place even more faster, because faith itself is a force and part of the process. So she says, but this supreme science, O Lord, is to be united with thee, to confide in thee, to live in thee, to be thou. And then there is nothing that is impossible to the man manifesting thy omnipotence. So this is the condition. It's not like, I have some kind of belief and things will happen. It's not about, forcibly a religious belief where people gather together and say, oh, nothing will happen to us, while we are leading a most degenerate life with full of ego. And she's not talking of that. She's talking of a genuine abandonment to the Lord, and for that we don't have to break a rule, we don't have to prove a point, we don't have to gather inside a temple or a mosque to say that, look, I have so much of faith in God. That is stupidity. Not only stupidity, it is an egoistic thing, but it is something which is within us. We may be anywhere, it doesn't matter. We may be in a train, we may be in any situation, like this man who was caught up in a traffic driving a car. So we could be anywhere. Faith is something which we carry all the time. It is not that if I go to a temple and pray before a deity, or if I go to a mosque and do 5 times prayer, then only my God will take cognizance of my faith. He cares 2 hoots actually about what we do outwardly. I don't do. He sees that little thing inside. So we must know the distinction. So what is this supreme science? To treat the divine as a confidant, to confide in thee. He is everywhere all the time, because we carry the source within us. To be united with thee, not to have this dualistic thing that he is found only in one place. If he is like that, he won't be God, or maybe he'll be God of a religion, not the divine. To live in thee, to dwell constant. How to live in the divine? By dwelling in our thoughts and feelings and will in the divine. That means the will wants to serve the divine, the heart wants to love the divine, thoughts want to think of the divine. To be thou. And then there is nothing that is impossible to the man manifesting thy omnipotence. So this is the condition. If we do that, then it's the supreme science. We can walk freely on any way, because it is her way. Sri Aurobindo in the Mother, 3rd chapter, 3rd letter, he says so beautifully that even a little of her grace will take us through much difficulty. We can walk on any way because it is her way. She is the one who will carry us. But this is the condition. Lord, my aspiration rises towards thee like a silent canticle, a mute adoration, and thy divine love illumines my heart. So she's not praying now that, oh, heal me, make me all right. She's simply turning to the divine with a mute adoration. O divine master, I salute thee. So we read this again, March 17th, 1914. As soon as physical conditions are a little difficult, and there results from them some unease, if we know how to surrender completely before thy will, holding cheap life or death, health or illness, our integral being enters immediately into harmony with thy law of love and life. And all physical indisposition ceases to give place to a well being, calm, deep, and peaceful. I have noticed that if we enter into an activity which requires a great physical endurance, what fatigues the most is the anticipation in advance of all the difficulties to which we shall be exposed. It is much wiser at every moment to look only at the difficulty of the present minute. This makes the effort easier because it is always proportionate to the sum of force, the resistance we command. The body is a marvelous instrument. It is our mind that does not know how to use it. And instead of promoting its suppleness, its plasticity, puts into it a certain fixity arising from preconceived ideas and unfavorable suggestions. But the supreme science, O Lord, is to be united with Thee, to confide in Thee, to live in Thee, to be Thou, and then there is nothing that is impossible to the man manifesting Thy omnipotence. Lord, my aspiration rises towards Thee like a silent canticle, a mute adoration, and Thy divine love illumines my heart. O divine Master, I salute Thee. Namaste.